We've also been joined by James DeGale in the studio. How are you?
I'm fine.
Just popped down the road.
Down the road.
Yes, we're almost on your doorstep, aren't we?
Yeah.
I was just saying to you, you're again. I'm sure I see you on the tube coming back from an Arsenal game.
Most probably.
A couple of seasons ago.
Most probably. I'm always there.
Keeping it real as well, travelling on the Piccadilly line.
Right.
But you pop to QPR sometimes as well.
Yeah, because it's in my family. My granddad was a big QPR fan, so it's in me.
Yeah, well, it's great to have you with us tonight. Now, you're fighting in a month's time, European Super-Middleweight title. How are the preparations going?
Preparations are fantastic. It seems like this camp's been going on forever because I was meant to be boxing the 17th of September, then the 23rd, then the 30th, and now I've got my date the 15th of October. But I've been in the gym for the past, it feels like ever, I think 10, 11 weeks, and I've still got another 4 weeks left. So preparations have been going well. I've been sparring Darren Barker, I've had some good sparring. And I just can't wait to get in there now and be European champion.
James is with us for the next 25 minutes or so, by the way, on 5 Live Sport. If you've got a question for him, then do text us on 85058, or you can tweet me one. It's at Ellie Oldroyd. But Mike and Bunsey, I know, are desperate to talk to you, James.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, James, about the fallout from the defeat by George Groves. All this time on now, how are you feeling about that? How have you come to terms with it?
Obviously, it hurt me. Of course it did. It hurt my ego and I lost my O. But listen, it's boxing, it happens. A lot of great fighters have lost their O. Sugar Ray Leonard, some of my favourite fighters, Muhammad Ali. So you've got to live with it, and I'll be back stronger.
Have you all sat and watched it? I mean, really watched it. I don't mean your family. I mean, you and Jim, sit down, shut up, watch it, that kind of thing.
Yeah, me and Jim have done that about 100 times, Fancy. And I still don't know how. Obviously, it was close. It was very, very close. But I still have myself up about 3 rounds. And that's on a serious note. I don't know how they scored it, but I could bring in the crowd. I could bring in all different kinds of things. But listen, that's the way the coup.
Did the crowd get to you that night? Because it
didn't get to me, but it could have. It could have
affected the judges in certain.
Definitely,
because they oohed and ahed every time George moved.
Steve, the close rounds where there weren't much happening and I was pushing the fight, but Groves was throwing two or three punches. The majority of them were going over my head or on my arms. And maybe they like remembered cheer and maybe scored it to him. You never know.
But was that, James, the best of you that night?
No, and everyone.
So why wasn't it the best of you? I'm just interested because we've just been talking about David Haye perhaps fighting Vitaly
I'm no
Klitschko.
David Haye though, man.
No,
I had an infected toe. I had a bad rib.
But the point I'm making is there was a lot of insults flying back and forth during the build-up, and I wonder, did you give too much of yourself in the build-up?
Maybe, but me and Jules don't like each other. I mean, it goes back years.
So in that sense, was it a useful experience that maybe in the future, if you come up against something like that, and there'll be nobody with the back catalogue and the history?
Just hold it down a little bit. Of course, maybe I was Of course, maybe I was a bit too raw and a bit ruthless, but we've got history. It goes back years, and I don't like him, so I'm not going to hold my mouth.
But it was a massive fight to have that early in your career, wasn't it?
People forget what he was calling me. He was calling me horse face. He was calling me this. He was calling me that. But I got
he got away with it because
you
used a couple of things that you then couldn't use. Not that they're that bad.
Well, I dropped the ginger and all that because, but he's ugly, and there's nothing wrong with that. I said that.
But I mean, it's one of these things that we talk about all the time, isn't it? You know, and it's people bad mouthing each other, and there is a point where it kind of tips over, doesn't it? And how hard is it? I mean, you say fine. You don't have to like the guy, you know, you're going to fight him, but is there a point where you have to say, okay, right, this is now going over the top, I've got to rein myself back in? Or is anyone saying to you, come on, James, step back from this?
I've realised that, and that's why if it ever happens again, I'm going to keep that shut and let my fist do the talk in the ring. But that's why there was 12 to 15,000 people there, because the hype and because of me. So...
James, you talked about, sorry Mike, you talked about, you know, you and Jimmy have watched it so many times and you still think you won by 2 or 3 rounds, and as you say, you could have go 2 rounds either way. I couldn't scream with that. On the night I told you I thought George had won by a round or 2, by a round, or maybe 2, but the point I'm trying to make is that the point I'm trying to no more than that, no more than that. The point I'm trying to make is, do you acknowledge that you could have done more in other rounds?
Of course. And
so you left the ring with something.
Well, yeah, really.
Too much.
Yeah, and as I say, it's a learning curve. But I think a lot of people forget I've only had 11 professional fights. I was a British champion, beating seasoned professionals in my 9th fight, 9th professional fight. So I've learned so much. I've learned that 12 rounds is a walk in the park for me. I've learned I got cut In the 9th round, I had a good round in the 9th round, but in the 10th round, I had a rubbish round. I got beat. I lost that round because I was worried about the kite. It was dripping in my eye. And I've learnt that I'll never let no one nick the fight off me like that again. Like,
so, and not to maybe give too much of yourself, as Mike pointed out before the fight.
I'm not going to change my previous 10 fights, Buncey. I've been humble. I've been alright. Yeah. It's boxing. We're not in there to give each other a kiss and whatever. We're there to fight.
So how do you feel, James, about George Groves now being in the same promotional stable, having been signed by Frank Warren just recently?
At first, when Frank told me, I was a bit shocked, but when I digested it and I thought of it and he sat down and explained it to me, good move. And I'm glad, because the rematch will happen sooner rather than later.
There's certainly more chance of the rematch happening
Most
now.
definitely.
And how will you approach the rematch when it does come about?
I'll be a bit more chilled, relaxed, and maybe hold my mouth a little bit more, but I'll go in there ready to knock him out.
Because the things, it's because we all love the hype. He's right, isn't it? It's why people go along and say it. But I mean, but as you said yourself, James, that it rebounded. Perhaps if the crowd were behind George Groves,
I got made the villain, and he was the superhero. George Groves was the superhero. I couldn't believe it. But hey, that's how it works.
I think in this case, the result of the first fight is enough to sell the second one. We were talking earlier, as tragic as it was, about Michael Watson against Chris Eubank. Their first fight sold the second fight without any real stoking up because it was so close.
And however how much George goes on that he taught me a lesson and this and that, what nonsense comes out of his mouth? It was very, very close, and a lot of people thought I won.
But did you get the sense he was reading you like nobody else does, though? Because he does know you very well and your style.
And I know him very well, but I've never known him to be so negative. Honestly, when we used to spar, I've never known him to be so negative. So maybe I've got to give him a bit of credit because fair enough to him. Yeah, he got in there and that little and okay, I'll give him a bit of credit.
James, you talked about the rematch there, and obviously it's something that moved closer once Frank done some sort of promotional deal with George, and obviously you're happy and comfortable with Frank. What sort of time scale do you think? Let's say we'll talk about the Polish opponent in a minute. Not that I'm going to pronounce it. I'm going to leave that to you. We'll talk about that in a moment. So let's say you win that title, and then you win a couple more fights, and he has a couple more fights left and right. What do you think? You fight in November next year or before then? So a year from now?
I think early part of next year.
Oh, really?
I really do. I
April,
think,
May, something like that.
Please God, everything goes right. Hopefully he carries on winning and defending and looking good. I win this European title. I box again in December. Early part of next year.
Okay.
I think it's got to happen because Touchwood, I have the European title. Please God, he still keeps the British and Commonwealth. There's no one for him to fight apart from me.
No, it's a massive domestic fight. It was last time. I mean, what's amazing about this fight? We talked about Chris Eubank and Michael Watson. Both those guys have been in great big fights already. 20 or 30 fights, 20 odd fights each, 25, 26 years of age, seasoned, ITV, 10, 12 million people. So you expected to do good business. These two kids, George has had like 11 or 12, you've had about 10, and they're selling out 16, 17,000, doing absolute amazing figures both on radio and TV. Now that's unique to the modern business we're in. That's unique.
It's rivalries that we want to captivate us, isn't it, Mike? It's it's the rivalries like these guys have that make us really fascinated and make us love boxing.
Yeah, and I think what was important about the fight as well is it produced. It wasn't the result that James wanted, but it was a great night and it was a cracking fight. And so often we spend so much time in the build-up, and the night itself disappoints.
It weren't really the humdinger that I thought it was going to be.
But it was fascinating all the time.
It was every second. It was every second, James. It really was, man.
So we'll come back. We'll talk about your next opponent in just a second, James. But well, James DeGale, Olympic champion, of course, from Beijing, nearly 4 years ago, James. I can't believe how time has flown. We've talked about your fight against George Groves and your defeat there. You're going to be fighting this Polish guy who Bunce's name can't pronounce his name in a month's time. Just quickly tell us about him before we talk about the other fights, including one of the fights that's also on that bill.
Yeah, to be honest, I ain't seen too much of him, but what I have seen, he's a good fighter. His record speaks for itself. He's only had one loss in 30 fights. He's European champion, and he's been there and done it. But I ain't seen too much of him, to be honest. I know he's a typical Eastern European, but he can be technical when he wants to, and he's going to come to fight, and he won't let his European belt slip easily.
And in Europe, I know we're in Europe, but in mainland Europe, especially in places like Germany and Poland and emerging countries with TV, especially with pay-per-view, that European belt really parlays into cash. This guy, they just launched a pay-per-view TV in Poland, and this guy, if he were to keep his belt, trust me, he can make some serious money. And nothing motivates a pro fighter like a pound note.
44,000 turned up at the new stadium last weekend to watch Thomas
business.
Adamek against Vitaly Klitschko.
Yeah. That's at the Liverpool Echo Arena on the 15th of October.